Hilchos Krias Shema Perek Revi'i. The laws of reading the Shema chapter 4. Today the topic is all those who are exempt from Kriyat Shema. All the people that are patur don't have to say Kriyat Shema. People that are doing mitzvahs, people that are getting married, people that are at a levaya, at a funeral, people that are ritually impure. We're going to see all the laws about it today. The Rambam begins, Halacha Aleph, Nashim va'avadim uktanim. Women, slaves, and young children under bar bat mitzvah, pturim mikriyat Shema. They are exempt from reading the Shema. Women are always exempt from any mitzvah that has a time bound. Mitzvah t'sisha azman grama. Slaves are like women, so women are exempt, they're exempt too, in the area of mitzvot. And children, of course, also, they don't have the chiyuv till they're 13, 12 years old. 13 for men, because women are exempt. Nevertheless, we still teach young children to read the Shema in its time, with the blessing before and after, to educate them in mitzvot. Like every time we talk about chinuch, there's an obligation to educate your child, to prepare him when he's going to be bar mitzvah. Now the Rambam moves to a new topic, what's called osek b'mitzvah. If a person's heart was busy and anxious to do a mitzvah, so he's distracted, he's only focused on the other mitzvah that he's doing, patur mikola mitzvot u'mikriyat shema. He's exempt from all mitzvahs, and especially in this case from kriyat shema. The Torah says, you have to speak about the Shema b'shivtecha bevetecha v'lechtecha v'derech. When you're sitting in your house and when you're on the road. So the Talmud says, b'shivtecha bevetecha, when you're in your house, you have to read the Shema. But if you're not in your house, if you're distracted, if you're in a mitzvah, v'lechtecha v'derech, when you're traveling on a regular road, you have to read. But if you're on Hashem's derech, if you're on Hashem's path, doing a mitzvah, another mitzvah, you don't have to read the Shema.
What's a mitzvah that would qualify as that?
For example, lefichach, therefore, chatan shenasa betula, a groom who was marrying a virgin. So in those days, it was very important that if a woman said she was a betula, she was actually a betula. If it was discovered that she wasn't, there's a whole process that can come out of that divorce. Ta'anat betulim, it's called, we're going to learn about it much later, all about this. So if he's marrying a betula, so she's a virgin, patur mikriyat shema ad sheyavo aleh. He is exempt from kriyat shema till they have relations. Lefisha en da'ato pnuya, because his mind isn't clear. Shema lo yimtza la betulim. He's worried. Maybe he's not going to find her to be a virgin. However, ve'im shaha ad motzei Shabbat velo ba'al, if he waited till motzei Shabbat and still hadn't had relations, we're going to see later in the Rambam, in those days, the custom was to marry a betula b'yom revi'i. If she was a virgin, the Mishnah says you should marry her on Wednesday night. So there's Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, and now it's motzei Shabbat, and he still hasn't had relations yet. So at this point, he's no longer distracted. Chayav likrot mi motzei Shabbat ve'elach. One has to read from Motzei Shabbat and onwards, because his mind has calmed and he feels familiar with her. Afal pi shelo ba'al, even though he hasn't had relations, he's not distracted enough to exempt him from Shema. Today the Shulchan Aruch rules that af chatan patur. Every groom has to read Kriyat Shema, even on the night of the wedding. Halacha bet aval hanoset habeula. But one who marries a woman who already had relations once before, she's no longer a virgin, afal pi osek b'mitzvah. Even though right now on his wedding night he's doing a mitzvah, the mitzvah of pru revu, to have children, chayav likrot. He still has to read Shema. Ho'il ve'en lo davar shemevalbel da'ato, because there's nothing confusing his mind. The Rambam's language on Halacha Aleph was tarud v'nechpaz. He's busy and anxious. When you're marrying a woman who you know what her status is, it's not confusing you. V'chein kol kayotzei bazeh, and similarly, any similar situations, you would also not be exempt. You would actually be obligated. And like I said before, today Shulchan Aruch rules that every groom must read the Shema no matter what. Now we move on to death. Halacha Gimel. Mi shemet lo met shu chayav litabel alav. If a person's relative passed away, a relative who he has to mourn. There's 6 relatives in the Torah that you have to mourn. Father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, and wife, also 7. So if any of those people died, so you're in avelut, you're in a state of mourning, patur mikriyat shema ad sheyigberenu. You are exempt from reading the Shema till you bury the dead. Mipnei she'en da'ato pnuya likrot. Because your mind isn't clear. That falls into the category of somebody who's distracted by a mitzvah. He has to bury the dead. His mind is unclear. Till the burial, he doesn't have to read. What if you were a person who was appointed to watch the dead body? Today, if a person passes away by night, and they don't bury until the next morning, yes, shmirah. You have a constant watch. People are there watching the body. In those days, it was actually even like technical. The Rambam says that people used to steal dead bodies. The Talmud says people used to steal dead bodies, or animals would steal them, so you have to watch them. Even today, we do shmirah more al pi Kabbalah. We don't leave the dead body alone. But what if you were that person? You're guarding the dead body. Afal pi she'eino meto. even though it's not your dead relative, but you're part of, let's say, the Chevra Kadisha, who's in charge of the burial society, who's in charge of the dead body. Patur mikriyat Shema, you're also exempt from reading the Shema. Why? Because you're doing the mitzvah. But if there were two watchmen, ha'echad mishamer, then leave one to watch. V'hasheni nishmat l'makom acher v'koreh. And the second person should slip away to somewhere else, read the Shema, v'chozeru mishamer, go back and continue guarding. V'nishmat ha'acher v'koreh. And the second guy goes now and slips away, and he does the reading. So that way, you can do both. You can watch the dead body and still do the Shema. Similarly, the person who's a grave digger, patur mikriyat Shema, he's also exempt from reading the Shema while he's digging. The commentaries say even if he takes a short rest while he's digging, he doesn't have to read the Shema then. Why? Because taking a rest is part of the task. Part of digging is that you need a rest every once in a while. So the whole time while he's digging, he doesn't have to read the Shema. Halacha dalet. Even though there's different exemptions that could happen for the dead, but you shouldn't create that situation. So you never take out a dead body to be buried very close to the Shema time. Unless he was a great man. A great man we don't have to care about. Even though today the Shulchan Aruch says that Adam Gadol also. There's no such thing as Adam Gadol today. You don't take out till Levaya in the morning. You always go after the time of Shema. What if they did? They started the levaya, the funeral, they took out the dead body, time of reading arrives, and everybody's in the middle of doing the levaya. It's a huge mitzvah to escort the dead. What happens with Shema? Says the Rambam, Kol sheyesh lamita tzorech bahen. Anybody who the coffin needs, kigon, for example, nosei amita, those that are carrying the coffin right now, v'chilufehen and their replacements, v'chilufehen, and those who would replace their replacements. There were no cars in those days, no hearses. So if you walked to the cemetery and it was outside of the city, it's a long walk. So there were always people that were appointed to carry the mitah, and people to replace them, and replacements of replacements. So the first three levels, they're considered to be needed by the coffin, and they're exempt. Ben shayu lifnei mitah, ben shayu la'achar mitah, whether they're in front of the coffin and back of the coffin, or some commentaries say whether they already did their turn or they still didn't do their turn yet. P'turin, they're exempt because they're considered needed by the coffin. Ush'ar ha'melavin, but the rest of the escorters, everybody else by the funeral, she'en la mitat tzorech bahen, who the coffin has no need for, chayavin, they have to stop and read Shema. Halacha hey, hayu oskin behesped. What if they weren't yet at the funeral? They were at the first stage. They were still eulogizing. V'higia zman kriyat Shema bizman shehamet munach lifnehem. V'higia zman kriyat Shema, and it came time of Shema. Bizman shehamet munach lifnehem. If the dead body is sitting there in front of them, nishmatim echad v'korin v'chozrin lahesped. One by one should slip away, go read the Shema, and go back to the eulogy. En hamet mutal lifnehem. If the dead body is not in front of them, people used to just go to a chapel and do eulogies, even if the guy wasn't there. Kol ha'am korin kriyat Shema. Everybody has to stop, read the Shema. V'ha'avel yoshev v'domem. The mourner himself should sit and be quiet. He doesn't have to read till they bury. But everybody else, since the dead body is not here, they can't claim exemption. They must stop for the Shema. Halacha vav, kavru et hamet. What about if it's after the funeral? They already buried the guy. V'chazru ha'avelim lekabel tanchumim. And the mourners are coming back now to receive comfort. Right after the levaya, everybody divides into two. You make a row, and the avelim have to go through the row. That's called tanchumei avelim, comforting the mourners. So they went to the cemetery, they buried him. Now they're coming back. V'chol ha'am holchim achareihem mimkom hakever. Everybody's walking after them from the place of the grave. Lamakom she'omdim bo ha'avelim la'asot shura lekabel tanchumim. To the place where the mourners are standing, to make a row to receive the comfort. So if they're on their way now, and it's coming time for the Shema, im yecholim ha'am lehatchil v'ligmor afilu pasuk echad kodem sheyagiu lashura. If there's enough time for the people to begin and end even one verse before they reach the place of the row, yatchilu. Then since it's time of Shema, they should start. At least say the first verse. V'im lav lo yatchilu. But if there's no time, it's right here. The grave and the row is 2 steps away. Lo yatchilu. You don't begin. Unless, of course, the time is literally passing. If the time for Shema is in 2 minutes, you have to stop and say the Shema. But if there's enough time to do both, First comfort the mourners. After they leave, you begin to read. Bnei Adam ha'omdim bashura. What if the row was already formed? They're all in the row. And now it's time for Shema. Hapnimim, the ones on the inside of the row, shehin ro'in pnei ha'abelim, they see the mourners. Pturin mikriyat Shema, they are exempt from kriyat Shema. They can be considered to be doing a mitzvah. V'hachitzonim, but the outer ones, the ones that are further out in the crowd, and they don't literally see the mourners. Ha'il ve'enan ro'in et ha'abelim. Since they don't see the mourners, chayavin bikriyat Shema bimkoman, they're obligated to read Shema in their place. So those are the general exemptions: marriage and death. But the truth is, any other mitzvah that you're involved in, you don't have to read Shema. Halacha Zayin says the Rambam, Kol mishehu patur milikrot kriyat Shema. Anybody who is actually exempt, according to halacha, from reading Shema, im ratzah lahachmir al atzmo likrot, if he wanted to be stringent with himself and nevertheless read, koreh, beautiful, he can read. V'hu shetehei da'ato pnuya alav, but it has to be provided that your mind is clear. Aval im haya zeh hapatur milikrot mivuhal. But if the person who was exempt from reading was in a state of anxiety, he was confused and rushed and disturbed, you can't say, I'm going to be more stringent and read. It's not being stringent, it's being lenient, because you're not focused. So you cannot read till you're calm, till your mind is calm. Halacha chet, final halacha. Kol hatme'in chayavin b'kriyat Shema. Anybody who is ritually impure is still obligated to read the Shema. They make a blessing before and after, even if they're actually impure. Even though they have the possibility to ascend, to become pure from their ritual impurity that day. Later on in the 10th book of the Rambam, it's a whole book about ritual impurity. Sometimes you become tamei, you have to wait 7 days to go to the mikveh. Sometimes on the very same day, you can become pure. So what if, just go to the mikveh, take care of yourself, and then read Shema? No, even if you know you can go to the mikveh that day, you can read Shema while you're impure. Kigon, who's an example of one day tumah? Hanogin b'sheretz. People who touch a sheretz. There's 8 special rodents. I don't know if everyone's, you take a picture of it, okay? These are the 8, the 8 rodents in the Torah. Choled, that's the weasel. Chulda, b'ivrit. Achbar is a mouse. Tzav, that's a toad. I don't know what a tzav is in modern Hebrew. Tzav is a turtle in modern Hebrew, right? But in Torah it's a toad, a small frog. Anaka is a porcupine. Gam b'ivrit. Okay, it's different. In the Torah, Anaka is a porcupine. Koach is a chameleon. I think in Hebrew it's called zikit.
Some people do call it.
Some people call it koach. Okay. Lita'ah is a lizard. Chomet is a snail.
Okay.
And tinshemet is a mole. Shein la'inayim. You know this one? Okay, these are the 8 shratzim in the Torah. These ones are the ones that give you tum'ah, ritual impurity. So these are the 8 shratzim that if you touch them, you're impure for 1 day. You go to mikveh the same day. So,
What about snake?
Huh?
Snakes.
Snake is a different thing. Snake is a different law. O benida v'zava umishkava b'chayotzei bahen. Or you touch a menstruating woman or a woman who's bleeding irregularly, not on her regular period, and whatever she sits on. It's going to be a whole set of laws later on, what's called tamei mishkav. People that are so impure, according to the Torah, that whatever they sit on also becomes impure. So if you touch these women, or their chairs, their couches, b'chayotzei bahen, or anything similar to them, you become tamei for that day, and you can go to mikveh that day. Even so, you can read Shema while you're impure. However, says the Rambam, the Ezra u'beit dinot tiknu. Ezra and his court established, shelo yikra b'divrei Torah bal keri levado. There's one person who shouldn't read Torah, and that's a person who was called a bal keri. He had an emission of semen, one time. He shouldn't read Torah. V'hotzi'uhu miklal sha'arat me'in ad she'yidbol. And they excluded him from the category of all the other impure people till he goes to mikveh. V'lo pashta takanazu b'chol Yisrael. Says the Rambam, nevertheless, they tried it, but it didn't work. This enactment never made it to all of Israel. V'lo haya koach b'rov hatzibur la'amod ba. And there wasn't enough power in most of the community to stand up to it. Ulfichach batla. Therefore, it became canceled. Whenever the sages made a decree that most people couldn't handle, they canceled it. And this essentially, every time you have relations with your wife, you become a balkari. So in those days, that means almost every morning you have to go to the mikveh. Today, it's easy to go to the mikveh every morning. But in those days, it was very not simple. You go to the river, it's cold, it's this, it's that. So the Chachamim saw that it was not sustainable. So they canceled it. Kol Yisrael. Therefore says the Rambam, all Jews have a custom. Likrot b'Torah, v'likrot Kriyat Shema, v'hen ba'alei krayin. We read the Torah, we read Shema, even in a state of impurity as a Baal Keri. Because Torah words cannot become tameh. Ela omdin b'taharatan le'olam. They stand pure forever. Shneimar, as it says, Halo kod vari ka'esh ne'um Hashem. Hashem says, my words are like fire. Ma esh ena mekabel tumah. Just like fire can't become impure, av divrei Torah ena mekabelin tumah, so too Torah words cannot become impure either. And therefore, even if we're impure, we can say words of Torah and words of Kriyat Shema. Brich rachamana desayan. Blessed is Hashem who helped us. Mazal tov for finishing the laws of Kriyat Shema. Sat Hashem, tomorrow we begin Hilchot Tefillah, the laws of prayer.